Joining me now is independent travel editor Simon Calder, along with Alicia and Becca, who are still in the studio. Simon, some scenes. Now, first of all, help us answer the really big question here on Talk TV. Is it from Gerrit or Gerrit?
I'm going to call it Gerrit. I believe it's derived from a Dutch name, but Gerrit seems to get it, and Gerrit is definitely wrong.
OK. So, well, despite its name, it is causing chaos up and down the United Kingdom. What is the latest on our roads, rails and ports and airports? OK,
well, if I might start on the railways, because they are absolutely the worst affected in terms of the number of people who are still stranded out of position. Many of them actually woke up in the wrong place this morning and still aren't where they need to be. And Scotland is the place, the country which has taken the brunt of this. Yesterday at about this time, we had this kind of amazing domino effect of lines being cancelled right across Scotland because of the high winds, the worries about things falling onto the lines. There was actually one train in Scotland on the line down from Aberdeen where a tree fell on the cab.
A serious collision, wasn't it?
And fortunately, everybody was safe, but a very worrying event. And clearly, that's why they want to be absolutely sure that there aren't going to be any dangers. Things were hoping to start up. They're still all cancelled on the West Highland line. That's a beautiful line which runs from Glasgow, Queen Street to Fort William, to Mallaig and to Oban, and many other cancellations in place there. In England, we've had a whole range of problems on the railways, some of which is to do with Storm Gerrit, tree between Rugby and Lichfield, which meant that the West Coast main line, Trent Valley section was closed, things having to go via Birmingham, which added a long time to those. And more recently, a loss of electric power south of Darlington on the East Coast main line has been causing problems. And then train cancellations all over the country because of staff shortage. I've just picked up that the line between London, St Pancras and Sutton, lots of cancellations because they didn't have
so that's
staff
on trains.
available.
How are the roads looking? OK,
the roads are certainly better than they were yesterday. If you remember, we saw terrible scenes of the A9 going from Perth up to Inverness. Some motorists stuck there for many, many hours because of a sudden and very heavy sustained fall of snow. That's now melted away. Now the main problem is just wind, rain, stuff on the roads and things.
So general sort of hazardous driving conditions.
Exactly, and I mean, we've heard horrible stories of how people were having to try and drive through blizzards, and certainly you are going to be safer on the rails than you are on the roads if you can find a train to take you somewhere.
And finally, our ports and airports. I noticed that the only hovercraft still functioning in the UK wasn't functioning today between the South Coast and the Isle of Wight. How are the ferries and planes looking?
I'm afraid the hovercraft is still not working, but you can use your ticket on the Fast Cat ferry from Portsmouth to ride on the Isle of Wight. Other ports looking OK. Dover, the delays we saw yesterday due to staff shortage among the French passport control officers, getting up to 2-hour queues to get into the port. They've now gone. Western Scotland still seeing lots of cancellations. The latest faller is between Wemyss Bay and lovely Rothesay on the Isle of Bute. And yeah, at the airports, all looking reasonably good, but British Airways put in a number of extra cancellations. They're up to 26 short-haul domestic and European flights today.
Best advice is probably stay tucked up at home. And also joining me live is Talk TV's weather presenter, Joe Wheeler. Joe, thank you so much for joining us. Have we seen the worst of this storm?
Of this one, yes, quite probably so. In actual fact, I mean, it did bring some fairly dramatic conditions. Parts of Scotland saw the highest wind gusts that they've seen since 2016, 2017, topping out at 89 miles per hour. Now, we'd anticipated 85, so, you know, 89, not that much more. The nighttime brought us this rash of very strong storms out towards the west, which resulted in the tornado of what you speak. But I think the main thing in terms of naming this storm was the knowledge that there would be an awful lot of people on the roads, particularly those who've taken advantage of the fact that Christmas was on a Monday. So they had the weekend before, plus Boxing Day after, and Wednesday they were going to start moving and making their way home, which is putting an awful lot of people on the roads. And also, of course, an awful lot of people who don't necessarily travel that much the rest of the year. They'd go and see friends, family, and then, of course, think, well, it's time to go home now, need to be back for work, need to be back for the animals, you know, whatever. And we're on the roads whether they wanted to be or not. And that was the problem, that we had this real rash of problems right across the country, the very strong winds. We got some heavy rain, and then, of course, we got the rain turning to snow over the high ground of Scotland. So, I mean, it was a multifaceted danger zone yesterday, and the storm hasn't quite gone. It will influence us for the next couple of days, bringing some very blustery weather. At the moment, it looks like showers, some of those showers merging together to give some longer spells of rain, still some hill snow. In essence, we've got this cold air to the north, milder air to the south. So we're still suffering these winter problems over northern areas, and probably will tonight with a frost, the risk of some ice on the roads. Milder further south, but we've had coastal gales. And those winds finally start to ease tomorrow, becoming confined to the northeast. But then again, Saturday brings another area of low pressure. Now, this is a bit of a double tap, because areas which have seen strong winds now see a second lot of strong winds. So if a fence didn't fall down this time, or your tree branch didn't come down, it may come down next time. And so, yes, this new area of low pressure arrives on Saturday. It's a deepening storm. It's deepening within the jet stream. So it's not like the kind of storm that you can monitor across the Atlantic and say, yes, we know exactly what it's going to be when it gets here. It is growing all the time. So really, we only know once it arrives how strong it's going to be and what kind of damage. But this, again, is going to bring some snow over the higher ground, as we still have that cool air across northern parts of the country, and some heavy rain further south, and, of course, the strong winds. So another storm to come. And then its position is going to be critical to exactly what we see on Sunday, which is New Year's Eve, another day when people are likely to travel, to see friends, to see family, people who maybe don't travel the rest of the year round. Now, if that low pressure stays over us, well, it stays mild and just a bit blustery. But if it shifts off to the east at all, well, then it allows very cold air in behind it, and we could be looking at some wintry hazards. So, yes, keep an eye on the weather, I think, is really the message here.
Well, Joe, we know you'll be keeping us in touch with the weather here on TalkTV. So let me just pick you up on one thing you said there. I didn't think tornadoes really happened in the United Kingdom. Of course, people who live in Stalybridge will be able to tell us differently. You say there was a significant lightning storm. And does that always lead to tornadoes? Is this something we're going to see increasingly in the UK, or does it remain mercifully very rare?
Well, do you know something? They're not even that rare. 25 to 30 we see each year. And, of course, you've got the difference between a tornado, a funnel cloud, you know, a water spout. We see quite a lot of those in Cardigan Bay. But in essence, as soon, you know, as a forecaster, as soon as we saw those thunderstorms, we realised there was the energy there to start creating that vorticity, which is the basis of a tornado. So, yeah, we do see them more often than you think. They obviously don't cause as much damage as we saw last night in Stalybridge. But think back to Birmingham, which I think was about 2005, which caused massive amounts of damage, where they move through built-up areas, where they create enough energy, where they have enough energy to get going. Yes, they can, and they do.
Joe, thank you so much for joining us. Please keep in touch with the weather over the coming few days here on TalkTV. Simon, well, sounds like there's a bit of misery to come still for people trying to get away for the new year.
Yeah, if I may, if you've got any choice at all, I would urge you to set off as early as you can for your New Year plan, both ideally tomorrow, as Joe was saying, things are going to get a little bit easier before they get worse again, and also earlier in the day, because the earlier you start, frankly, the fewer hazards that could possibly affect your journey, and the more time you've got to sort them out. And that's why, yeah.
Isn't there, I don't want to belittle this in any way, but I mean, I was looking at the panic on the internet last night when I was coming down to London. It's Avanti West Coast, do not travel till Friday. I just turned up at Stockport Station. The train arrived moderately late, 15 minutes late, but it's Avanti West Coast, so there's no surprise there. I got on the train, I got to London, it was fine. Isn't there a bit of sort of panic that we have about these things these days?
Look, you and I are both regular rail travellers, and that's why you're accustomed to delays on Avanti West Coast and other companies. I just think that particularly, and Joe was mentioning people who don't travel a lot, they are getting a picture of a complete lack of resilience on the railways and indeed other forms of transport, which I'd love to say is completely misplaced, but you will know and I know that over the past 18 months we haven't been able to plan anything more than 2 weeks ahead because of the possibility of strikes in the most severe industrial relations problem that I've ever seen on the railways. And of course, everything from staff shortage, which we're experiencing now, to inadequate infrastructure and stuff that just comes out of nowhere, bad weather, which exacerbates the inadequate infrastructure. It's a really tough time to be a traveller, but I'm very glad you managed to travel all right. Most people will get where they need to be, but my heart goes out to people.
So your tip would be what? Leave as early as possible?
Yeah, leave as early as possible to get where you need to be. Don't sort of hang around and think, oh, I'll get a train at 4 o'clock this afternoon if you get one at 10 o'clock this morning. Just gives more scope for things to go wrong.
And do those very early trains in the day tend to be better because overnight they've had the ability to sort of clear the tracks and do that? Or?
It all depends. I mean, yesterday we saw the most appalling scenes at London St Pancras International, where they put in, over Christmas and Boxing Day, new signalling, which was marvellous until they pressed the button to turn it on, and then it didn't work. And it was utter chaos from the morning onwards.
Who would have thought a new computer system that wouldn't work?